Now, if wars were fought with weapons, then geopolitics is played with suppliers. For decades, India's defense cupboard has been stocked predominantly by Moscow. But in a post-Ukraine world now, that reliance is beginning to fade away. It's looking less like strategic alignment and more like a strategic risk. So there are delayed deliveries, sanctions have hit supply chains, and there is outdated tech as well, which is forcing New Delhi to rethink its shopping list when it comes to its defense equipment requirements. So enter the West, the US and France. These are now emerging as India's go-to partners for mega defense deals. We're talking about cutting-edge drones, we're talking about fighter jets, and also co-production arrangements that include Make in India clauses in the kind of defense deals that are being cut. But now the question is this shift that we're looking at, is it born out of choice or is it born out of compulsion? Will it secure India's long-term strategic autonomy or merely replace one dependency with another? And what are the geopolitical messages that are being sent out to Russia, to the West, and very importantly, to China? So we are going to unpack the risks, the rewards, the realignment that we are watching with our power-packed panel tonight. Retired Major General P.K. Sehgal joining us, a distinguished defense analyst with insights into India's military hardware calculus. And in a moment, we'll also have a seasoned geopolitical analyst, someone who tracks the big power chessboard, Dr. Vivek Mishra joining us. He's the Deputy Director at the Strategic Studies Program of the ORF. It's going to be great having this discussion with you, Major General Sehgal. You need to tell us first at the outset about what we've seen in Operation Sindoor or even the latest drone attack that Ukraine launched, and that happened rather stealthily on Russia. The Chief of Defense Staff has been speaking about this. Anil Chauhan has a clear take. Let's just hear him out before I turn to you, sir. Listen to what he had to say about this.
The warfare today is at the cusp of, if I could say, a third revolution in military affairs. The first evolution in military affairs was something to do with maneuver warfare, which became about because of advances in ground mobility and air mobility. You could transport people faster. It also was there because of long ranges. The second revolution in military affairs was net-centric warfare, in which battlefield transparency, situational awareness, this became important. Information dominance became important. That came about by the US Armed Forces because of advances in communication technology and computer technologies and ICT. And today we are at the cusp of a third revolution in military affairs, which I have termed as convergence warfare, because what we are seeing is not one technology, but there are a number of technologies which are affecting warfare presently, and they'll happen in future. All of these are heralding a new change in warfare, which is bringing about a change which is disruptive and non-linear. And it's actually occurring at a pace which is unprecedented. And these technologies range from sensor, advanced materials, propulsion, hypersonics, artificial intelligence, big data, advances in cyber, space, all of them.
So, Major General, you heard what the Chief of Defense Staff is saying over here about the different needs of India's defense infrastructure. Do you agree with him? Do you see this big shift taking place in modern warfare, which merits our needs to be re-examined? Explain to us that change in weaponry, especially through Operation Sindoor, what we are seeing as far as Ukraine's latest attack on Russia is concerned as well. The methods of military engagement are changing, and they're changing fast, aren't they?
Absolutely no doubts in my mind that it's changing in a very, very, very rapidly and at a very fast pace. And those who do not catch up will be left behind. As far as Operation Sindoor is concerned, India carried out 2 critical strikes, once against 9 terrorist hubs in flat 25 minutes, and thereafter on night 9th, 10th, on 11 air bases again in 23 minutes. In 48 minutes flat, we were able to demolish Pakistan. But what Pakistan did on the night of 7th, 8th, and 8th, 9th, they launched about 1,000 drones against us, as well as several missiles and several aircraft. But none of them were able to pierce through the wall of air defense that we had created. And Akash Steel, which was only launched last year, proved to be an absolute game changer. The S-400 performed exceedingly well under in India, as against it's not performing so well under Russians, which means the man behind the machine, the training, the leadership, morale and motivation also comes into play. the Indian training is far, far superior than what the Russians are trained at. They could not operate their own weapon system with the same efficacy that we've been able to do. As far as the Barak missile system is concerned, again, it proved very, very stable and very good. Very good. It has got a range of about 100 kilometers. Whereas S-400 has got 400 kilometers. Then we had the Akash missile system, which is an indigenous production of ours.
Correct.
With a single shot kill probability of 90%. It performed exceedingly well. And then we had several types of missiles. We had the Pichora missiles, we had the Osaka missile, we had the Tunguska missile, and we had the man-portable Igla and the Iglas. All these weapon systems, though some of them were got from Russia, like the Pichoras were got from Russia, the Iglas were got from Russia, S-400, all of them performed exceedingly well when operated by the Indians.
Right.
When operated by the Russians, they haven't proved so well. It's apparently indicative of the fact that the Russians are not so well trained as the Indians. Their morale and motivation in the cause for which they're fighting
Right.
is not
so is it
the
more
same
about
as
the
the cause for
people?
which
Is it
India is
about the
fighting.
weaponry, sir?
Then the best thing that happened was that Akash Tir was a new system that was rolled out. It stunned the entire world. Americans don't have a system like that. Neither the Russians, nor the Chinese, nor even the Israelis.
Right.
Though Israel has the army, the Iron Dome, but this proved to be even far more effective.
Correct.
This is based on all the sensors are connected to a central organization that is known as the Kashmir. Then all the weapon systems, all the air defense control centers are connected. There is a complete situational awareness. Several hundred targets are being tracked at the same point of time. They are detected, being targeted. And then the weapon designation is being done from the central, which can be a vehicle with just a laptop on it.
Correct.
This is something the world had never seen before and proved very, very effective. That notwithstanding, there is a need for India to diversify its weapon procurement.
Right.
When we had Soviet Union, all the three services were up to almost 85 to 90%. Army, Navy, Air Force were dependent on the Soviet Union. That time we were getting equipment at friendship prices.
Right.
Once the Soviet Union collapsed, they became commercial. Russia was no longer giving you that friendship prices. And we realized that leaning onto a single vendor or a single country could be disastrous in a future war. There
Correct.
could be sanctions. There could be even lack of spare parts. Then there's a quality control problem as far as Russia is concerned, and we wanted to diversify.
Right.
Secondly, the Western equipment versus the Russian equipment is far more qualitatively superior.
I see.
It's far more dependable, far more reliable, easier to operate, easier to maintain, and easier to sustain.
Right.
The spare parts backing, unfortunately, from France and Israel, spare part backing is absolutely stupendous.
Right.
As far as Americans are concerned, you have no idea whether they will impose sanctions or they will not impose sanctions.
So, Major General, there seems to be a clear case for India to upgrade. And to upgrade, perhaps the need is to look west, is what you're suggesting. Mr. Mishra, does this seem natural, this kind of shift that we are seeing in warfare styles? Is this what's making India drift away from Russia and tilt closer towards the US and towards France? I mean, is this a sign of India getting more practical about its defense needs? Or is this more about the larger East versus West realignment, especially in India's post-Ukraine experience with Russia?
Yeah, I do think that there's been, what is key to India's evolution as a major defense, both market as well as an ecosystem, is the fact that there has to be diversity here. And I think that is where the evolution of the Indian, the key to Indian defense strength lies. And if you look at specific technologies, the CPRI data shows that there has been greater import from the West than from Russia in the past few years. But I do think that there are certain technologies, for example, the nuclear submarine technology, where still the dependence, I mean, we were working with France, and which is often called the best bet. But if you go to the United States, there are regulatory challenges that we face in terms of sensitive technologies right now. So Russia remains your best bet in terms of nuclear technology, nuclear-powered submarine technology at this point. So I think this nuanced picture has to be taken into account, that you have to have a diverse market until a point where India has a self-sustained, self-reliant defense system of its own. which is of course a long arc in the future. So I do think that there has to be, despite the tilt, there has to be a greater degree of diversity and in the basket that India imports from. Now, certain technologies, of course, like the drone technology, autonomous systems, for example, you have to rely on the West more than you have to rely on Russia, because if you see the geography, America is, for instance, straddled by oceans on both sides, and therefore has greater technology resilience in terms of autonomous systems. And Mahindra is already partnering, as the joint statement of India and the US point to, with Anduril Technologies of the US. There's the L3 Technologies, the L3 company, which is partnering again with another company in the US. So I think there are certain systems where your natural dependencies are pointed in a certain direction, and there are certain other technologies that you will have to depend on legacy systems.
Right.
So I think it has to be a mix of the two.
So if it is going to be the mix of the two, how does it change India's diplomatic game? Because we're hearing from the American side, the US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he's pointing out that India is now starting to purchase military equipment from the United States. In fact, he's spoken about this. Just listening to what he said about India buying more defense equipment from the US. And he also says that India in the past has rubbed the US the wrong way by buying arms from Russia. This is what he said.
There were certain things that the Indian government did that generally rubbed the United States the wrong way. For instance, you generally buy your military gear from Russia. That's a way to kind of get up, under the skin of America if you're going to buy your armaments from Russia. So I think India is starting to move towards buying their military equipment from the United States, which then goes a long way. And these kind of things, just creating that relationship, being a part of BRICS. India is starting to move towards buying their military equipment from the United States, which then goes a long way. And these kind of things, just creating that relationship, being a part of BRICS,
Yep.
right? Which is, let's move to not support the dollar and dollar hegemony. That's not really the way to make friends and influence people in America. So, the president calls that out directly and specifically, and the Indian government is addressing it specifically and directly. And that's how you move on to a really positive place.
Well, Mr. Lutnick is talking about making friends and influencing people. But Mr. Mishra, do you see the American stance on this kind of move that India is making towards buying more defense equipment from the Americans? Is it more about the US becoming that much more of a friend to India, or is it about just sheer commerce? Buy our arms and we'll support you.
So I think there are two perspectives that I really want to add here. One is the fact that India and the US have, in the joint statement, announced that there's got to be a 500 billion trade mark that has to be reached at the end of this decade. Now, that's an ambitious figure.
Yes.
If you got to reach that figure, your defense sales naturally has to go up, which is the strongest pillar of India-US trade relations and economic relations. But the second point that I wanted to underscore more importantly is that Howard Lutnick's points here are completely off the mark. The tone and the tenor of the United States has to change because there's got to be, we've signed a defense agreement which is already in place for 10 years, for 10 successive years, which started in 2005. And 2025, it was renewed for another 10 years. So it's a natural trajectory there. Now, BRICS has got nothing to do with defense. It's a global South organization. And the reason why I said that Howard Lutnick's point is off the mark, because India has categorically said that it stands against de-dollarization within the BRICS. So I think it has got to have a more holistic perspective and an actual understanding of where India stands within BRICS.
This time we're looking at more diversification and this move away from Russia. do weigh in on this, Major General, because India is still dependent on certain Russian platforms. You did mention the S-400, and it did well for us. There is also the reliance on the submarine fleet, Russia being the only country to offer India its nuclear submarines. In that kind of scenario, how realistic is it really right now to reduce our dependency, at least over the next decade, without having a diplomatic pushback from Moscow? Major General.
See, Russia is involved in a very major war in Ukraine, and it is not possible for Russia to continue to splash the spare parts at the speed and at the pace at which we need. Secondly, the Russians, for example, when we got involved in the Kargil war, a nut which was costing 2 rupees, they priced it up to 2,000 rupees. They've also become like Jews and ensure that they get the maximum takeoff from you at that point of time. At one point of time, we trusted Russia implicitly, but Russia has become very close to China, and their electronics systems are now Chinese, which could compromise our defense in a very major way. Second thing, we can no longer depend on Russian supply chains. And as far as America is concerned, up to a point of time, we never trusted America. They were pro Pakistan 65, 71, even at the time of 1999 war, they were certainly not pro India. Even today, time of Operation Sindoor, America has been playing a double game. All that notwithstanding, we've got very many foundational agreements with them in place, and we've got growing relationship with them as far as port is concerned. We also be doing joint exercises with them, and we've now started posting officers on staff of each other's. Like we got officers from the Army, Navy, and Air Force in the CENTCOM, Central, and similarly, the Americans have got the officers posted here. I am very certain India is being very, very careful in what exactly we are buying from them. But as far as the nuclear submarines are concerned, there are only 4 countries in the world, 5 countries which have got nuclear submarines, including India now, 6th country, America, Britain, France, Russia, China, and India, which has started manufacturing one.
Correct.
Except for Russia, no other country, whether it is France or whether it is Britain or America, is willing to offer you the nuclear technology as far as submarine warfare is concerned.
Yes.
And you've been forced, unfortunately, to rely on Russia. And Russia is not willing to give you a nuclear submarine. They're giving it to you purely for training purposes, etc.
That's right.
These. They have not given any submarine ever other than on these.
Correct.
And India was wanting to lease another submarine for another 10 years. I am not too sure whether we're going to go ahead with that lease as of now. I'm sure by this year or by the next year, we will have the second submarine, nuclear submarine of our own. And the third submarine would also be somewhere nearing the trial stage.
Right.
Under these circumstances, that notwithstanding, the S-400 system is absolutely proved outstanding.
Right.
And BrahMos, which is proved absolutely astonishingly first-rate weapon system. In fact, it has stunned China, it has stunned everybody else. And now that with assistance from Russia, we're going to convert it into a hypersonic missile with a range of initially 800 kilometers and subsequently range of 4,000 kilometers. Flying at a speed of 5 times to 7 times the speed of sound.
Yes.
Will make it an exceedingly potent weapon and something that the Chinese and the Pakistanis and anybody else would be very worried about.
Right.
And this technology is absolute. And now the Russians are offering you Su-57, the stealth aircraft with complete transfer of technology. Even they are willing to give you the source code. Americans are not willing to give the transfer technology, nor are they ever willing to give you the source code.
So you're saying that the Russians are more compliant partners, Major General? You're saying that the Russians are more compliant, they are more helpful in that sense?
Well, they are helpful because it helps them. They are also aware of the fact that we are increasingly diversifying our defense procurement. Over the next 10 years, we intend procuring equipment from the world about $100 billion.
Right.
And Russia also wants to have a huge piece of the cake.
Yes.
Russian imports up to some years, up to 2009 was 76%. Now they've come down to only 36%. And
correct.
This dependency is going down by the day.
So the
and
dependency is going down.
Pakistani card also.
The dependency is going down, but by how much can we afford is the question as we harp on this diversification drive that India needs, even as we build our own capabilities when it comes to servicing our defense needs. So, Mr. Mishra, when you talk about Washington's perspective or even the West perspective, is India still seen as a hesitant partner, you think, given our oil ties, for example, with Russia? even our reluctance to condemn the Ukraine invasion? Are we seen as a hesitant partner to the West?
I think particularly with the United States and Europe, India is increasingly now seen as a reliable partner in this part of the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, because there are natural tendencies that align the two sides. There's defense alignment, there's strategic alignment, and then there's the values alignment. So I think there's gradually that alignment set that has come into picture now. But in terms of as diversification, as you were talking about, I think there's still got to be at least half a decade or a decade where this diversification, a diverse basket for India will continue until you have let's say a 50 to 60% autonomous, self-reliant productions within your country in terms of where you want to go with defense exports to other countries. So I do think that's the trajectory and path. And now in the aftermath of the recent clash with combat with Pakistan, I think some of these systems were actually tested in real time and will have a boost for defense export markets, including in Southeast Asia and Latin America and the Middle East. So I do think that there is an opportunity there. That's the positive side of that clash.
So do you see the US now becoming our chief arms supplier, Mr. Mishra? And is that a good thing or a bad thing in the overall scheme of our defense needs today to ward off the Chinese threat, most importantly, even if it's in a proxy form through Pakistan? Do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing where India is concerned at this stage?
So I don't think the answer really lies in a binary. But if you look at the F-16 example, which the Americans in the past offered F-16 to India, and India declined because the competitive edge that India would have with Pakistan, which also had F-16s, would be really nothing. So you have to, and that's why you see that we went for Rafale. But the joint statement of February this year actually mentions sixth generation aircraft to be built jointly, or or at least supplied from the United States side. So I do see that this reliance, especially if you have to have edge vis-a-vis the Chinese technologies, reliance on America is something that is going in an upward and northward trajectory.
We are talking about this Make in India anger coming into our defense deals. The kind that India has with the West. In fact, the Defense Secretary Rajesh Kumar Singh, he was speaking exclusively to us on ET Now, and he's been listing out the shortcomings that the defense sector needs to work on. And he's been emphasizing the need to focus on the ease of doing business in the defense sector, ensuring that the private sector participation goes up. Just listen in to what he said for a moment.
At the institutional level, I would say that we need to work on ease of doing business. We need to ensure that the defense industry really suffers from the license permit Raj, and to some extent it cannot be avoided. You cannot produce lethal weaponry without having even a license. You can't delicense these sectors, but you can make it happen faster. We have to ensure that our procurement processes give them an equal access when it comes to orders. That, as I said, I've already committed that we will be ensuring that nomination-based allocations of orders to the public sector will be a thing of the past. We'll increasingly go for competitive bidding across all platforms.
So the involvement of the private sector in India's defense procurement, Major General, how feasible is a true co-production when it comes to the Americans or the French, when it comes to the defense majors of these two countries, for the private sector in India to really come into their own in the defense sector and for fulfilling India's growth in that space?
As far as Israel is concerned, Israel is willing to do 100% transfer technology of their weapon systems. Like, we got the Green Archer radar from them, we got the Barak missile from them, we got the Spider drone from them, which was a combat drone which proved very effective in the recent war or skirmish with Pakistan. As far as America is concerned, G414 engine transfer, they say it's only 80% transfer technology. As for G404 is concerned for Tejas, there have been slippages, and that is where India cannot depend on them to that extent. As far as the other thing is concerned, we're going to produce co-jointly two weapon systems in India. One is the Striker APC, and second is the Javelin missile. This will be with 100% transfer technology. Now we got to see when we say 100% transfer technology, do they give us the critical technologies? Because eventually the 10% or 5% that technologies that they withhold, even Western which they withhold, is something which in terms of expense covers almost 50 to 60% of the total cost. So will the Americans give us that the final fuse, etc., and the final? But Indian industries also improved a lot. Participation of private sector has done amazing wonders. In fact, Mahindra and Mahindra, when they went in to produce the Vajra guns, they produced them far more quickly than what even the South Koreans could have done.
True that.
Though it was supposed to be, that 90 guns were supposed to be completed over a period of 3 years.
Yes.
They were able to do it, give it to us in about 12 to 15 months. And then they, similarly, Adani and Larsen and Toubro,
Yes.
which is manufacturing your first nuclear submarine. It was a company which was manufacturing children's biscuits, and they gave you the first nuclear submarine, Ariane.
Right.
Now the private sector has come into being in a very major way. It's unfortunately in the past we never relied on the private sector at all.
Right.
The private sector is beginning to do things that possibly will stun the world. They've got innovativeness, they've got creativity, and they believe in adhering to timelines. As
So
far
it
as
is-
DRDOs, etc. is concerned, HAL is concerned, nothing has been available to on the promised timelines.
Yes.
Air Chief has been speaking on those timelines, etc.
Right.
Because not even a single system was ever delivered on time, and in terms of the numbers that we wanted.
Correct. So we
So
are
this is where
growing,
the
and we are
private sector
growing
is-
quite rapidly as far as India's private sector is concerned. In the defense space, we are seeing growth, but right now India seems to be really, as far as defense diplomacy is concerned, we seem to be at an inflection point where the guns we buy are as much about geopolitics as they are about national security. And as this landscape is shifting from the Red Square to the Pentagon to the Elysee, now New Delhi must play a much smarter game, ensuring capability without compromise and access without any kind of over-dependence. Our big question, of course, remains, is India diversifying or decoupling, and at what cost? That's something that we'll keep debating. Our panelists, retired Major General P.K. Sehgal and Dr. Vivek Mishra, thank you for joining us for that strategic deep dive into India's defense sector. Thank you for joining us on India Tonight.